Hello everyone and welcome to week 9 at Concordia University for Exercise Physiology for Sport or Advanced Exercise Physiology. Today we're going to be talking about fatigue, or this week, fatigue, exercise testing, and performance factors, in which there are numerous factors we need to be discussing, of course, as there always is. That said, a few points from the last week or so. Some challenging concepts are, once again, is concepts that we need to make sure we have some good clarification on. RPE. RPE is your rate of perception of effort. If 1 is your lowest possible perception of how hard you're working, 10 is the highest possible perception of effort. Like I don't feel like I could be, I feel like I couldn't be working any harder. That's a 10, right? And we want to have that perception of effort from our athletes during any max effort or testing of any kind. We're doing a max sprint test, 40-yard dash, or we're doing agility type work that lasts less than 10 seconds as well, or power work that lasts less than 10 seconds, vertical jump, you name it. All of that should be the highest possible effort, right? It might not necessarily be the highest possible force output, especially with power type work, maximal strength, speed, agility type work. And we're not going to probably see every time 100% force output relative to what they can actually do. That is the goal, and that's why we have to test fairly often to find out what the true maximal effort is, right? We have to find out what it is, then we got to know what we're getting then at any other effort, how close we are to that effort. Was that our goal? And if it's not our goal to get that low of an effort, then we got to take a closer look at how much preparation we're giving to our athletes, not just in terms of this day, with warm-up, with rest periods, with the proper intensity, with the proper duration of work, which is definitely the case, and the cool down included, but also how many days between doing things, and what we're doing the days leading up to that day. A lot of factors, right? A lot of things to look at. It's very, very complex. There's no question about it. So many factors to be looking at. But with that 10 RPE as an example during a max effort, heart rate might not be 100% max. Matter of fact, I wouldn't expect it. We shouldn't expect it for a 40-yard dash, agility work, speed work, power work. You're going to work for 10 seconds or less. Your heart rate should not be getting up to 180, 190, 200 beats a minute. That shouldn't happen in less than 10 seconds. There's something probably seriously wrong if someone gets a heart rate up that high in a less than 10-second effort. It's possible it could be their 10th repetition. So they've already done 9 sets, their 10th set. Something like that could be the case. But honestly, if the performance gets really high, we're going to make note of this again, it's not going to be indicative of high-level performance if heart rate is really, really high. Remember, all heart rate is the amount of beats the heart is beating, trying to get proper oxygen and nutrients to the tissues, and of course removing metabolic waste, gases, from the tissues, and redistributing nutrients back again so that actually you can replenish ATP, replenish nutrients, water, all the different things the body needs so it can perform work of any kind, its own work, whether we're talking about the smooth muscle, meaning our glands and our internal tissues, as well as our striated muscle or muscles type 1, type 2A, type 2X muscle fibers. That said, though, that's why we don't make the heart rate the goal ever. Let's get to a certain heart rate. We set those ceilings, but not floors. I don't want you to go higher than blank today based on what we know about their performance in the past. On a given day, the very first day out, you'll probably have an arbitrary number for heart rate based upon some formulas that you'll use with your athletes and have a general idea. But then based on their performance, you have to decide if that was an appropriate heart rate or not. And we have to adjust it according to what our performance expectation is, knowing full well with every successive set, we should expect the heart rate to rise higher and higher and higher. If performance goes down at all during that time, then we've found a heart rate we don't want to see next time. Okay? VO2 max, or the aerobic capacity, that's going to, of course, improve over time, but you might have level 10 max effort, but you might not be approaching your normal highest level effort of VO2 max, which is what you can perform for 10 to 12 continuous minutes. That's your pacing or your level of work capability at your VO2 max, right? So we got to take that into account. If they're not hitting their 100% VO2 max, but they're a level 10 RPE, then they're probably not ready to be performing at that level today, or they're not going to perform well if we don't take measures into our hands with their rest periods, altering their intensity and whatnot, and their warm-up and their cool-down as best we can. And you hear me say it all over and over, and I want to see it more and more in your posts, to talk about the controllables in practice, not just all the things we talk about outside. Too many times we're putting things in our discussion board posts about what to be doing between days. When let's talk about primarily what time we have with them, that 1, 2, 3, 4 hours a day, which is pretty impressive. If you have 2 or 3 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week, you're looking at more than 10% of the time that your athletes have available to them in their life is spent with you. So you have a huge impact capability, a big capability for impact with your athletes because of that. That VO2 max, of course, we'll talk more about that shortly as far as what expectations we normally would have based upon the goal performance. but don't expect them to be the same. And of course, force output. Wouldn't that be nice that just because you performed at a 10 RPE, your maximal force was there too? Not always the case. They are not the same. None of these four are the same thing. That's why I keep asking you to give me clarification on what your expectations are of each when you're talking about any given drill or exercise or set. Okay. Risk versus development of actual disease or syndromes, problems, disorders. We have a particular impact we can make behaviorally, of course, based on what they do with us when they're with us. We can be talking about what they do when they're not with us, but I would save that for the end of your practice after everything has happened. You have 5, 10, 15 minutes, somewhere in there maybe. Maybe it's 2 minutes at the end of your practice to remind them what they should be doing the next 12 or 24 or 36 hours, whatever it is, 48 hours if they have an extra long break from Saturday to Monday or something like that, what they should be doing during that time. And maybe reminding them all the things they might tend to do with not getting enough rest, not eating well, possibly considering things like drinking if we're talking about college age type kids, right? Or any age really, if you think that's a concern, you bring it up and say, let's take a closer look at how this impacts performance. Because here you are in this sport wanting to do well, and I know you want to do well, but if you go out there and you have blank number of drinks or you drink at all, you should expect that alcohol is a depressant. And it's actually going to be lowering your capability of performing very well, potentially. And the more you do it, the more it's definitely going to definitely impact that. If that's what you want, at the end of the day, I'm not going to be out there to be able to see what you're doing. And of course, you potentially might be breaking some rules, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that as well. But that said, you've got to take a closer look at thinking about when you have that moment, how is it going to impact the things that you really care about? Having those kinds of talks, which I think a lot of you do, and based on what I'm seeing in your post, you are doing that, has a real big potential level of impact we can have upon our athletes based upon having those discussions. But really, we're talking about impacting our work periods, our intensity, and of course our rest during the sessions themselves to make sure we can impact them positively for not developing chronic related problems with their health and their well-being. Okay. American College of Sports Medicine has expectations for exercise for, I should have put it in the PowerPoint, but I'll certainly tell you, obviously. It's in your textbook as well. But 150 minutes minimally of at least moderate intensity exercise. Actually, it should say it's really 75 minutes bare minimum, but really 150 minutes to 300 minutes of moderate intensity exercise and 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous exercise. They can be substituted one for the other. That's the bare minimum expectation for health. Right? You putting in essentially on the low side just over an hour per week, while expecting minimal benefits in health and at least maybe avoiding major health issues by being consistent with that 75 minutes. Of course, preferably that would be 7 days of 12 minutes plus, right? Or not quite 12 minutes plus, but 7 days of 11 on just under 11 minutes, right? Would be better. More frequency of exercising has a greater health impact than larger chunks with larger times between when it comes to just recovery level, light intensity, to even moderate intensity type work. Frequency matters. Duration matters, of course, secondarily on top of that, right? That said, as you go into more vigorous exercise, which American College Sports Medicine refers to as 4.5 miles per hour if we're talking about somebody walking or running. Now, our athletes aren't going to have any problem spending a lot of time probably doing work that's probably higher than that speed, right? So it is certainly going to be considered vigorous. But if you take that into account, when ACSM specifically refers to 150 to 300 minutes of vigorous exercise as being the expectation, and here we have our athletes are getting 500, 600, 700 plus minutes of that level of exercise, there is that risk for chronic related problems. At least you need to take that into account. By always the standard I always ask you, I'm always looking for that same response. How do you know if things are working? They're improving. They're getting faster. They're getting stronger. How do you know they're getting stronger? You have to actually measure it. You have to do strength tests. How do you know they're getting faster? You got to do that 40-yard dash. You got to do agility type work. You got to do power type assessments, actual assessments. You actually have the clock on them, or you're measuring actual force output through some measuring tool. Otherwise, you're just guessing. And if we're guessing, we're going to find out the hard way how much it's going to impact performance negatively at the end of the season or over the course of the season or the course of their careers as athletes. We don't want to shortcut them or short them, that's for sure. But beyond that, from a health perspective, some total exercise, ACSM expects, and this is not your textbook, this is actually working with National Institute of Health many years ago with a great big study back in 2005, that if you want, if you email me, I'm more than happy to find that information for you and get that to you. But that said, it's they actually recommended 3.75 hours a week for minimum health benefit. to avoid getting diabetes, avoid heart-related conditions, avoid obesity, significant obesity, morbid type obesity, right? And the expectation was actually 7 hours. So essentially, 490 minutes plus, maybe more for someone who want to be fit. You're not going to put 500 minutes in per week. You should be not expecting to have that fairly lean body and be able to perform reasonable levels of strength and conditioning type efforts, right? But if you want to be athletic and truly perform at your maximal levels, the minimum expectation, we should say the average expectation, was about an hour and a half per day, averaging out to essentially 10 and a half plus hours per week. Not a problem for most of our athletes. We're putting that kind of time in with them already. We've got to make sure we put the quality time in there. But people who are not currently engaging in regular athletic activity with you as a coach, you want to be encouraging as best you can, help them define what they should be doing when they're not with you, the best that you can, right? Long term, not just for them during the time they are with us as athletes. How do we avoid fatigue? Well, remember the 4 primary life factors I mentioned in previous videos before. It's not specifically in your book, and they talk about it offhandedly in different ways, but never do they specifically refer to it in these 4 specific ways. I think it's really important that you do that. That we have our exercise, which is the greatest impact we can make upon our athletes, because that's the time that we have with them. They're focusing on exercise, right? That's our greatest impact. Of course, nutrition certainly plays a monstrous role, but sorry, not as big as exercise. Exercise, to make it really clear, in case you didn't get this from past videos, if you exercise properly at the right levels and pushing just enough overload, 1% plus more than you're used to doing on a regular basis, trying to get a little bit more when you can, recovering when you can't, right? Then if you do that, your nutritional habits improve. It is a proven fact. People who exercise regularly eat better than those who don't, even when they're not necessarily taught how to eat better. They do it, right? So that you can, however, eating better is not necessarily meaning to go out there and exercise. Exercise has a greater impact on nutrition than nutrition has on exercise as far as actually getting things improving without even trying to do it. It just happens, okay? That said, doesn't mean you don't focus on nutrition. To a certain extent you do, but less than 5% of your time, at the very, very most, spent as a coach should be on nutrition. But sleep, talking about too, somewhere in that 5% less or less of your time, 2% of your time, 1% of your time. Talk about the need to get 8, 8.5, 9 plus hours of sleep for young athletes, higher end. Someone who's older, yeah, they might get by 4, 5, or 6 hours a night. Get by. No one performs at a high level. Research supports it over and over again. They're not getting at least 7 hours of sleep, preferably 8, 8.5. And some people are 9, 9.5ers, needing more sleep, right? I know certainly in college I was in that category. A lot more was needed, okay? That said, and the last one is life stress. Life stress, what's going on in your life? A lot of you have talked about that. Are they prone to peer pressure with smoking, with drinking, drugs, just staying out too late and doing things they shouldn't be doing, that it impacts the potential as an athlete or as a better person, right? Dealing with that, helping keep the life stress down, helping them with the issues they have at home, boyfriend, girlfriend, we say helping them, just talk to them. You don't have to become their counselor. You kind of feel like you are. Let them talk. Be a sounding board. You don't have to solve all of their problems. You can ask them, what would you like from me? At the end of their big, long, hopefully they open up to you. That's fantastic. But what would you like from me? Right? Well, how can I help you? And some of that is, of course, going to come from, well, not surprising, our fitter principles, our frequency of working out. Knowing that person is going through a lot right now, who knows why. They're a human being. You've got to give them a little leeway. It's a little bit easy to kind of go, really? Your boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with you? Seriously? Well, if it's happening the 3rd time this season, I'd make it a bigger deal, like you need to make it your life together, okay? You're having a bad day, I get it. Or a bad week, totally understand it. Okay, I'm going to let you understand that you're not going to give me 100% effort. You're going to try. You're going to give me a 10 RPE, but your actual output's probably a little bit down because you're worn down, you're stressed out. I get it. You got to get through this. I'll help you through this, but I understand right now you may have a little bit of a downturn, but you got to get through this as fast as possible. Okay, I expect that from you. You should expect that from you. That kind of a discussion, right? But frequency of training for recovery level, light level, we're talking about every day. Okay, frequency of training for more moderate intensity, maybe every other day. High intensity type stuff, we're talking about every 2 to 3 days at the very, very most. The very, very most. How many of us as coaches, how many of us have done this? And you know who you are. I have done it too. But how many of us have actually done this whereby you have high intensity workouts 1, 2, 3 days in a row? Why do you expect that performance isn't, why would you not expect performance to decline? It will. You can't do that. Can't do that. One of my favorite examples was Usain Bolt and the other sprinters in the most recent Olympics. They had their semifinals too close to the finals, and not to mention how they were prepping them with too much time between, delaying, how their warmth was impacted. All their times were slower than their semifinal times. I think they would actually be improving. It's finals now. It's the serious time. Yeah, but they were drained. They were worn down. So yeah, they only lost 0.1, maybe 0.2 seconds for some of the athletes, but that's a big drop when it comes to elite level, best in world 100-meter dash, right? You got to take all those things into account. Intensity, of course, measured always by heart rate. Heart rate should always play a role in that. I know a lot of you don't do that. You've got to start doing that. It's a simple check at the end of every drill, of every set. Ask them, find your heart rate, preferably right there at their radial artery, right there at their wrist, and actually say, find your pulse. Got it? Okay, start counting now and do it for 6 seconds, and then add a 0, and you know what the rough heart rate is. Perfect world, they got heart rate monitors on. You get the textbook first to 10 seconds, which is fine. Only problem with 10 seconds. Of course, you get 4 more seconds of data, so eventually you can find if they're maybe a little bit off by a little bit. 10 seconds might help you a little more in that accuracy. However, then you have to do the math. You're going to multiply by 6 rather than just adding a 0. So it adds a little more of that challenge. If you're up to the math, great. Or if all your athletes up to the math, great. Otherwise, I would do 6 seconds. Much better. Within 5 seconds of you stopping the activity, they got to find that pulse right away. Make it a habit. They'll start doing it. They'll run a drill and they'll grab their pulse. And by being focused and distracted, and we mentioned this, I believe, last week, it's mentioned in your textbook, and it's a very, very important factor. Athletes, when distracted during rest periods, not focused on their breathing and whatnot, just distracted by something in life, by you talking to them about something that distracts them, so not thinking about what they're doing, or by focusing on their heart rate, just to look at their heart rate rather than thinking about they're breathing hard or something else going on. Anything can get them distracted will actually improve performance. Rather than being too stressed out about the performance. But you want that data, that 6 seconds of the heart rate. And of course, ask them right after that, what's your RP? How hard was that? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, where was that? Okay. And if it's too high, heart rate wise or RP wise, then either increase the rest period or decrease the intensity period, or keep doing what you're doing and expect performance to go down. And we all know that's not what you want. Intensity also is the number of sets. So lower the number of sets you do, number of drills you have, okay? The volume of work. T is time. Well, ultra shorts, 10 seconds or less, right? Well, for power work, speed work, agility work, trying to maximize those factors, it's got to be done in 10 seconds or less. You can totally go more. But and some people were talking, several of you talk about game conditions. Don't try and match game conditions with every single practice for majority of the practice time. If you want to set aside once or twice a week to be focusing on game level conditions with game level speed, or maybe only a few minutes so you don't fatigue them, just to remind them that this is what it's like, from a general standpoint, conditioning wise, certainly using it when you can, but you got to be careful because you will actually wear them down, and the goal is not to wear them down, it's to get them stronger. Maybe you do game conditions for 5 minutes, just I'm throwing this out there, week 1, and maybe it's 6 minutes week 2, 7 minutes, 8, 9, 10, so you actually get better and better as the season goes on, rather than just going for, we're going to go over half-hour game conditions, boom, week 1, and make the same way every single time. You're probably going to wear them down. You got to take the time factor into account for game level conditions with work and rest. And I know you're trying to match football with a few second period of work followed by 30, 40 seconds of rest, but you can't do that all the time, and it's not going to be maximal power, because despite the fact that maximal power is 10 seconds or less, rest required 3 to 5 minutes. So we have to take that into account too. You should now know these things. Doesn't make it easier, it makes it harder, but you got to understand what you're trying to do when you set out these parameters. Of course, your time from 10 seconds or about 10 seconds-ish to about closing out about a minute, more of a high-intensity interval type work, and of course up to about 2 or 3 minutes potentially, but really high-intensity intervals like 20 seconds to 120 seconds, 2 minutes, 20 seconds to 2 minutes is about the ideal time frame, okay? And of course, endurance work really starts kicking in somewhere around 2 or 3 minutes up to about, well, hours, right? So take that into account for need based upon your athletes. And of course, type, what are you going to use? If you're a runner, be running. Don't get on the bike. Okay, if you're a cyclist, then get on the bike. Don't spend much time running. Okay, unless you're cross-training to trying to help avoid overuse injuries, that's different. Trying to strengthen the off-season, totally different. When it comes to actual performance, though, you got to spend more time on that apparatus or with those tools that you're going to use in your game. I would not, from a strength training perspective, do barbell lifting. Yep, would not do barbell lifting. It's a closed chain activity. It's going to be where you're fixed to the load. So if your one side is stronger than the other one, guess what's going to happen? It's going to throw you off. How many people do you know that are perfectly symmetrical strength-wise from left to right, have perfect balance, where a barbell makes any sense? Most of people should be using kettlebells, like one kettlebell each hand, or one in one hand and nothing in the other one, or dumbbells, or having some, or just using unilateral loading, where you're only loading one leg or one arm at a time, rather than bilateral loading, which allows you to lift more load, but symmetrically is going to throw you off and keep your dominant side getting stronger and your weaker side getting weaker, causing more physiological problems long term. Avoid barbells except for someone who has extreme high levels of flexibility and mobility and symmetrical strength left to right. I don't know many athletes who have that. I would avoid barbells if I were you. Okay, I would forget the worrying about how much load you can lift from a max standpoint. Understand that you want to strengthen as a whole, not worry about the exact number itself. Okay, feel free to email me or ask questions about that more in greater detail if you want. Because I know a lot of you mentioned those barbell lifts because it's what all of our coaches did in the past. We all learned that way. Highly recommend against it in most situations. Okay, doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's not right for most athletes. It's just not. Okay, and be careful about doing the standard tests that have been done in the past, the max bench, max deadlift, max squat. Are any of those tests specifically valuable to your athletes? I questioned several of you who went right for the max bench press. I did it in high school, I did it in college, and after that I stopped doing it once I understood more about physiology and biomechanics from the standpoint of not that pressing is bad, no. Laying on your back and pressing a barbell load off your chest doesn't have a whole lot of meaning long term. Is it going to be some transfer for strength? Sure. But are there potentially better activities like standing up with a cable chest press if it's available to you? Yes. Dumbbell exercises? Yes. Single arm dumbbell type exercises? Yes. Push-ups? Yes. Okay. Doesn't negate it, but I want you to think broader. Don't just do what you've done in the past. Okay. And of course, rest. Well, we've got to get those rest periods down, don't we? Got to be clear about how much ATP we want to get back, how much output we want to have, and base our rest periods accordingly, not just matching what we've learned in the past as well. Detraining, standpoint of neural detraining. Well, our nervous system is going to have a hard time motor skill-wise coming back to activity. We spent significant time off. Muscular-wise, well, you're going to get some hypertrophy loss, significant hypertrophy loss within a few weeks leaving activity. Primarily in the first 10, 12 days or so, the biggest things that go down, or actually we start to lose, stroke volume goes down, which means our heart rate, training heart rate is going to be higher than normal after 12 plus days, typically speaking, off doing any cardiovascular or conditioning type work. So what we want to see is a stroke volume go up, heart rate go down. We can't see the stroke volume go up. All we know is when performance increases and heart rate's going down, that is what's happening. Stroke volume is increasing. More blood is being ejected with every contraction of the ventricles of the heart, which is the goal, not a higher heart rate. Okay, becoming accustomed or becoming better adapted to the exercise, right? But if you're getting detraining, we want to avoid, remember, 2 weeks or less time off from something if at all possible. But understand that that is going to happen whether we want it to or not if we do take the time away. VO2 max and AT increase, they'll both increase similarly. Doing steady state high level activity where you're around that 75, 80, 85% or higher VO2 max. Certainly intervals are in that category. The high intensity intervals are as well. But don't go down the path of only high intensity intervals. You're going to wear people out. Okay, and that's why we want to be talking about them both together, recognizing that there are impacts to be made with both interval work and steady state type work. We have to know what we're trying to accomplish, of course, with our athletes, but we also have to take into account we don't want to fatigue them and wear them out. Okay, now this week, lactate threshold. Understand when we talk about lactate threshold, around 45 seconds or so is when it starts to kick in most situations at fairly high intensity work. Not just working for 45 seconds in general, but you're not going to see significant building up of lactate start to occur to about 45 seconds of work at a fairly high level at 70, 80+% level maximal force output. Okay, and of course, your performance capability at that lactate threshold capability at that level is going to be really helpful for performances where you're required to work fairly continuously or at least active for 12 minutes and beyond. So anytime you're going to be on the court 12 minutes or more, going to be on the field for 12 minutes or more, you're playing a role in a game or a match for 12 minutes plus, you want to be working at lactate threshold level work, glycolytic type work, interval type work to some extent, taking into account what we know now about energy systems, muscle fiber types, and rest. Okay, anaerobic or ventilatory threshold, the AT. A lot of people refer to the AT as the same as LT. It's not. Actually, the AT occurs after. Lactate threshold starts to occur, then actually about 10-15% different level higher is where the AT, or anaerobic threshold, starts to occur. That's why it's not exactly the same when we talk about blood level development of lactate versus your actual fatigue level from a standpoint of your capacity to handle work. Okay. That said, we want to take them both into account. We train them both by not overdoing the work level. Okay? Running economy, how much effort can you make at a given energy expenditure? Right? Actually, how much work can you do? Excuse me. What's your work output at a given energy expenditure? Well, we don't see it happen over time. By not over pushing our athletes, we're going to see the improvement in running economy. Unless we're dealing with swimmers or cyclists, we're talking about running economy, or some athlete like a lifter, most people, or a thrower, excuse me, we're talking about people who are going to have some benefit from running economy type work. That said, critical power is actually technically happening. The critical power level is where you're working above your lactate threshold. It's something you can handle for about 30 to 60 minutes of work. Whatever pace you can handle for about 30 to 60 minutes of work is pretty much about your critical power level, whatever that might be. 4 miles per hour, 5 miles per hour, 7 miles per hour, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You're crazy endurance oriented, right? That's your critical power. Okay, and it's really helpful working on that level steady state type work for someone who is, again, in any activity where they're continuously working to some level, at least a moderate level, 3 minutes and beyond. Right? Football player, not so indicative for them. Volleyball player, no. Basketball player, sure. Hockey, yes. Wrestlers and fighters, when they have those 3+ minute rounds, yeah, them as well, right? VO2 max, you're going to hit a plateau for someone who's regularly engaging in VO2 max level effort work 2.5 years from now, right? Not too much to worry about in that regard. You're going to plateau, right? If they're engaging in, remember, a minimum of 3 days a week for 20 to 60 minutes at or above that 70% max heart rate range longer term. Okay, we doesn't mean we have to go that level every time we train, because we can't be training for any given performance parameter on a regular basis every single day all the time. We have to have some recovery, some light level work. But that said, if we're engaging in 3 days plus per week of this level of work, then we're probably going to see significant change over time with VO2 max. When they're ready, we want to see more 5, 6, 7 type days of work in general, sure, but not every day is going to be trying to challenge their VO2 max. Okay. Interval training in general, I mentioned it before, we're talking about 20 to 120 seconds of work. Why? It's glycolytic. Okay, and with it being glycolytic, it's using mostly carbohydrate almost entirely for energy. So anytime you have athletes who are engaging in higher challenging work from 20 seconds, 120 seconds level of work, really even in the power work below 20 seconds, anybody who's engaging in 2 minutes or under a fairly challenging work needs to be very, very aware of their higher level of carbohydrate intake, because it's going to be vital for performance. And remember, nausea is a very common sign, or dizziness, very common signs of someone who is having issues with not eating enough carbohydrate for their training session at this moment. Preferably 1 to 2 hours before, eating at least 50 to 100 grams plus of carbohydrate. Could be higher than that, could be less than that for some athletes, but certainly you got to gauge it according to how you feel the whole way. Keep performing at a high level the entire time, you're probably doing it right. If you can't, probably not, right? Resting as long or longer than work period is a good general rule for your interval type work. Keep in mind that interval in general just means work, rest, work, rest. Doesn't necessarily mean high intensity, moderate intensity, or low intensity. It could be any of the above. But we want to have that rest period be as long or longer than the work period, bare minimum. Okay. Keep in mind though, if we have a 20-second work period at our highest intensity we can give out, which is 90-95% plus, okay, no, we're going to need 90 seconds rest. We're going to need the full rest, which is what the full rest is for a typical interval type work. Maybe up to 2 minutes. Could, but honestly, you start getting beyond 2 minutes, 2 minutes-ish or so, we're kind of pushing more into too long a recovery potentially. If they can't recover in that time period, if you can work for 20 seconds and you can't recover in 120 seconds, I would question your capacity for handling this level of work in general, because you should be able to recover faster than that. If you can't, it's too high of a level of expectation for your performance at this point in time. So give them shorter rest periods, but lower the level of the intensity, the speed, the pace, whatever it is they're doing. Okay. That said, when they become really high-level athletes, then maybe they can work for 90 seconds to 2 minutes and have only a 30-second break. But that's really unusual. It can be the case. Don't push athletes like that unless you're okay with lower-level performance. Okay? Keep it in mind. How much force is required? That's how we determine what the work period should be. 90%, 95%, 20 seconds work. We're okay with closing down to 70, 75%, probably 75% level output. Well, maybe closer to 2 minutes of work. 70%, 75% level force output around 2 minutes, give or take. Okay. If you want more than that, you got to go shorter in the work period. You want to have, you're not worried about the intensity, then you can go longer in the work period. Okay, and of course, why is that? Because of the ATP that's required. Okay, how much ATP is required. Heart rate and RP, I've already mentioned this before, but make this a habit. After every single set, every single time with your athletes, they'll get so used to it, it'll be like clockwork. You don't have to keep the data every single time and write it down. You can tell them to keep that in mind. We're going to do, this is our first set of 6. I want you to take, what's your RP right now? You know what it is? Okay, it should be about 7 or 8. If you're saying to me you're 6, you're probably not working hard enough. And if you're the fastest person, you're working at a 6, hey, you're just the most well-conditioned person here. But if you're one of the people at the end and you're getting a level 6 RPE and everybody else is beating you, then you need to put forth a higher level effort, okay? But don't be mistaken by the fact that you're going to probably have a lower RPE from your better athletes. It's going to happen that way, right? And that said, also the heart rate and making sure that they've got down below, good rule of thumb every time, below 120 beats a minute, excuse me, for any level interval type work of any kind, really any work. Why are we going to have them take a break and go again now? Heart rate's currently 130, 140. I don't know what you're expecting right now. If you're expecting 65% or less level force output, not a big deal. But if you're expecting more than that, gotta rest enough to get the heart rate down more, okay? And of course, for anaerobic power and strength, reminding ourselves that force development always improves strength and power, always. If you get stronger, you're going to be able to improve your force and your power, your strength and your power. However, it's only when you can produce force over a given distance, or how much we lift, how lift that load, full range of motion, or get over a 40-yard dash in what period of time, or 200, or agility-wise, back and forth laterally, 5, 10, 5. How fast can you do that in? We want to figure out how short a time you can do it in. If your goal is to maximize power, jumping higher, running faster, do things with the same amount of force for less time and build that out over time. Gotta have long rest though. Gotta have long rest. If you're wondering how to add in long rest for your athletes, well, then you do power work at the very beginning of the session after the warm-up when they're actually not fatigued yet, and they're not going to worry about having a long rest periods between. Get them a big line. They come around one at a time, so they have to be a forced long recovery, as opposed to standing around doing nothing. They're getting back in line, waiting for their turn, watching their fellow athletes go. That's a possibility. What I've definitely used with my athletes when the goal is maximal power or agility in a given given day. If it's pure conditioning, don't do agility work as conditioning with this little short back and forth burst unless you want to turn some ankles and hurt some knees. Right? We've got to be very careful about the level of expectation of intensity, type of work we're doing, given short rest periods. Please be careful with that type of thing. And of course, hypertrophy. The goal is to build mass. Your force output should be 70 to 85% of your max force output, whatever your one rep max is. If you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. It's real simple. What can you do for about 40 seconds to 75 seconds of work? You're going to get some hypertrophy if you work for less than 40 seconds. You're going to get some hypertrophy if you go more than 75 seconds. Okay. However, I'm trying to maximize muscle growth size. That is the goal. You want to be working that time period. That's about the ideal, moving deeper into the glycolytic energy pathway, but not into the aerobic pathway so much, somewhere in between the two. Okay, that's a good general work period, real good one. 39 seconds isn't bad, neither is 76 seconds. That's a good general work period. Okay, and rest period, it nails it. If your goal is to hypertrophy and mass building, 1 to 1.5 minutes between rest period. That's it, right there. Okay, and if they can't handle more than a couple, 2 or 3 sets, so be it. But they got to make it in the rest period, and they got to make it to the work period. If it's so light they can actually perform work for longer than 75 seconds, no, then it's the wrong weight. Move the weight up. People always ask when you move the weight up. When you can lift that load with control for greater than 75 seconds. Now it's time to move that weight up. Not because it says 864 reps, 246. If I were you, and we said this before, stop counting reps. Weight training blasphemy, right? Oh, I know. But then what was it all based on? What were reps based on? They're based on time. Where did we come up with 2 reps, 4 reps, 6 reps, 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps? It was based on the amount of time it took to perform the work. So rather than counting the number, go by time. You know what's going to happen? Their form will increase. Their technique will improve. Consequently, they'll stop looking at the number of reps. They'll pay more attention to what they're doing and get more benefit from what they're doing. And they'll meet the time standard, so they get the proper energy system working, so they get the proper muscle fibers working, so they get the hypertrophy. And that's why. Not just with hypertrophy, with every level of work. Okay? And of course, here, I'm just going to leave these numbers here for you. I have to go over them independently. But there we have our general expectation now. It's right there for you. For when we're doing recovery work, where should it roughly be? Low intensity work, moderate intensity work, high intensity. All of it's right there. Good general time frames. So when we're talking about what's the expectation of work today, that's what they should be doing. Right? If they can't do that, or it's not reasonable to expect over a given number of sets, then make adjustments accordingly. Okay. And of course, soreness is never good. Never, ever. It's not a good thing. It means pain. Pain is negative feedback telling you something is wrong. Now, we've all been told that that's good. It means you're working. No, it means your body's not able to handle whatever we're going to try and do next because it can't produce the same level of force now because you're sore. We don't want soreness. You don't want any athlete to be sore going into a competition. Why would you want them to be sore going into practice? We don't want them to be sore. Perfect world, we beat the heck out of them on a day when they can handle such work, right? Get them just really good after it, which is great on those days when they're really moving well and they can do well. Fantastic stuff. They're beat up. You have a great cool down. You take good care of them with a proper cool down, right? You educate them on what they should be doing between sessions. They come back and they're not going to be 100% the next day. You beat them up that day, but they shouldn't be stiff and sore. They may not be able to produce the same amount of force again, but they should not be stiff and sore. Cannot emphasize that more. PEMS is sore for 24 hours or less. Delayed onset muscle soreness is 48 hours or less. Go beyond that, you've way overdone it. Soreness is not a good thing. Please understand that. Okay. Final thoughts. Make sure you keep those performance plans in your posts. That's what you're putting in your posts every single week. Many of you are getting much better about that. That's the clarity we're looking for. And always note the 6 primary measures of intensity. That should be somewhere in your post every single time. How often we're doing something, what the intensity really is, what the time duration is of a given activity. If I don't see that, you're losing points. Just know that. Okay. And of course, type of exercise. What are you exactly doing? And of course, rest period, rate of progression where applicable. Okay. And of course, this is now week 9. This is the 3rd to final week. You have just next 2 weeks, just your Learn Smarts and your discussion board posts. But then we have our final, which is 2.5 times the value, even though it's still 100 questions, of your other 2 exams. So keep it in mind, prepare well, work hard, ask me questions, email me. You know the drill. Keep working at it. I know it's tough. I expect you to keep giving that level of effort that you've been doing all along and improving upon it. Because yes, I grade your discussion board posts based on not just your post itself, but what I've seen from you in the past. I'm grading you against you, which I think is what we should always be doing with our athletes, let alone our coaches. I wish you well, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.